Hello, good evening everyone. Welcome to SVA. My name is Tom Hoon. I chair the BFA program in Visual and Political Studies, which is sponsoring this evening's very special event, which is going to be a conversation between Lynn Gamwell and Barbara Rose. It was really Lynn's idea and Lynn's initiative that designed and organized this evening, so we have her to thank for tonight's event. I think most of the people in the room know Lynn. Lynn's been teaching at SVA for 22 years. Her most recent, among a long list of worthy accomplishments, is the publication of her book, which she's been working on for quite a long time, Mathematics and Art, a Cultural History, which has received tremendous positive press and reviews and is now being translated into many other languages, Chinese first and foremost. We would have a copy of it to show you here, but it weighs so damn much, none of us could actually bring it. It's freighted, literally, with incredible amount of imagery. It features really Lynn's most abiding passion, which is the relationship between math and science on the one hand and art on the other. I'm going to leave it to Lynn to introduce Barbara Rose. So please join me now in welcoming Lynn Gamwell.
Thanks, Tom. Okay. All right, Barbara Rose is going to talk to us about a very specific time frame, modern art in France in the early 20th century. And talk about the relation of it to a document that's 1,000 years earlier, a manuscript that was done in Spain in the 9th century. And so what I thought I'd do is we're talking about space in painting and concepts of space. And what I'm going to try to do it briefly is to give a very quick broad brush overview of concepts of space that inform these two traditions. Okay, so I'm going to so we're here, okay, and so we're in the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition as far as background, and the manuscript she's looking at, it's done in Spain, so it's Catholics. It's done by Catholics. It's a medieval. It's a illustration from a biblical text, but it's done during Islamic occupation of Spain. Okay, so it's an interface of these cultures, and then we end up in modernism, and she's talking about figurative artists. Okay, so we're in France, and all the artists are figurative. All right, and that's of interest. I mean, they're all. I mean, if we're in France, the traditions in early modernism. If you think of Cubism, Fauvism, so they're depictions, they're still lifes, landscapes, portraits. So they're depictions of things in the world out there. All right, and non-objective art develops here. Okay, it's in Munich, in Moscow. I mean, we have they're much more willing to let the image go. Okay, so we'll look at why this is and what the background of this is. Okay, and so we're going to go back to antiquity because we're going to just trace these different approaches. Okay, so if we're looking at these interrelated traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, we return here to the ancient Near East, and so these are the Abrahamic religions. I mean, they're interlinked, as you know. They all look back to their descent from Abraham, and so we look at the tribes of Israel here and the Arabic tribes in Arabia. Okay, and so I'm just reminding you, Abraham is the father then, of these traditions. By Sarah, he has Isaac, the descendants of whom are the tribes of Israel, one of whom is Moses. And by Hagar, the handmaiden, he has Ishmael, and Hagar and Ishmael go into the desert and found the tribes of Arabs. And this is much later, in the 600s AD, Muhammad is a descendant, and he's the founder. He basically returns the desert tribe to the God of Abraham. right? And this is a reconstruction of the first temple of Jerusalem, of Solomon. So this is built in Jerusalem, and it's built to house a document. It's built to house the Ten Commandments. Right? If you went into this building, there's no imagery. Okay? In Judaism, ultimate reality, God is we have names for God, but no pictures. Okay? We know Him by conception. We know Him by thought. Okay? This is an image of Rembrandt's image of Moses with the Ten Commandments. The commandments are revealed to Moses. They're given to him directly from God. He's shown here coming down from the mountaintop, from Mount Sinai, and he's seen the children of Israel in his absence make an image, and he's furious. So he destroys the tablets and destroys the golden calf. Okay, and the tablets are later lost with the destruction of Jerusalem, but they survive they're recorded in the book of in the Exodus, and preserved today in the Torah, in temple. So it's a tradition. It's a monotheistic tradition. It's a tradition where we know ultimate reality by thought, by thinking, by our prayers, and by words, not by images. The other tradition, the Arabic tradition, this is an Ottoman tile that shows the central building in Mecca. This is the Kaaba, the box. So it's a large, just dark building, and traditionally the tribal leaders in Arabia would they would come to Mecca. It's a trading town, and they would put their deities in the Kaaba, okay? And they're animist deities, like a god of rain, a god of sun, and so on. And so they were polytheists. They had many different deities. Muhammad founds Islam when he comes to Mecca and conquers Mecca, goes straight to the Kaaba and breaks all these idols, these deities, like Moses destroying the golden calf. Muhammad breaks the idols and declares monotheism. There is one deity, and we know him only by the word. We do not image him. Okay, so again, this is a text from the Quran. This is 10th century. Okay, so it's just the words, the form of the letters. If there is any decoration, it's completely abstract. Okay, so it's a tradition of without depiction, no pictures. We know by thought alone. For an example of a culture that makes pictures, images of the deity, we go to Greece. Okay, classical culture. Okay, so in classicism develops within this time frame, right? Between the time of the Old Testament and the establishment of Islam, classical culture develops, and so we're in Greece. The Greeks, they focused on life in the present. Life was good. They wanted to be healthy, run in the Olympics, eat well, and it's focused on the world around them. They built temples to this is the Parthenon. It was built as a temple to house an image of their deity. Phidias, the statue of Athena. It's lost to us. This is the best copy we have of it. It was originally 30 feet high, but this is the civic goddess, the protectress of Athens, and she is very much a person. She's just an idealized person. This is a rare example. This next is a rare example of one of these statues for a temple that we have. Okay, assuming he was holding a thunderbolt, this is Zeus. Okay, he's there. He's like us, and we can talk to him. Okay, he's a person like us. We can image him. Okay, and the Greeks did also image their everyday life. I mean, these deities were just idealized versions of themselves. This is a Greek warrior, okay, also 5th century BC, okay, with this stunning realism. We have almost no Greek paintings. I mean, we're talking tonight about the space of paintings, and we have almost none, but we have, I'm showing you one that we have from, that was preserved in Pompeii, so it's from the 1st century. This is an artist, a Greek artist, late, he's Hellenistic, you know, looking at the world around him. He's making this table in 3 dimensions. He's suggesting a 3-dimensional space. This is a rounded vessel with a highlight. This is a round platter that's tipped, so it's an ellipse. Okay, there's shading, there's cast shadows here. Okay, so these are, so this is a culture in which is picturing every day the world around it. They're living well in the contemporary world and imagining their deities as idealized versions of themselves, and they live high on Mount Olympus. This is also from Pompeii. At the border we see, again, like fruits and garlands. These are comedy and tragedy mix. This is a pebble mosaic. Okay, so it's a large floor made with these tiny pebbles. So we can, you know, it's not a painting, but we can get a good sense of what the depiction of space is. What we're looking at here is Plato and and some of his students. And what we get from Plato is another view. I mean, by this time, Plato's in the 300s. This classical vision that we've seen in the Parthenon, in Athena and Zeus, this is lost for many Greeks like Plato with the Peloponnesian War. Where was Athena during that war? She didn't protect us. He loses his faith. There's a lot of atheism in Platonic circles. They lose faith in Athena and Zeus. They didn't help us. Greece sinks into poverty during that war, and it's a civil war at the end of that ends the classical era. We're going to figure it out ourselves. Okay, so Plato said, you know, he doesn't put his faith in those deities. He puts his faith in reason. So we get another Greek outlook here that's very influential on later thought, you know, as we'll see. So Plato, you know, he doesn't, you know, he's not thinking of, he thought of a deity, he had his own deity. He was a carpenter, the demiurge, and this carpenter imposes forms. Ultimately, reality for him, it's more like in the Hebraic tradition. It's a reality that you know by thought alone. So he's shown here, but he didn't worship this other reality, this perfect world of the forms. He didn't build a temple to reason, he built a school. We're looking at the academy here. This is Athens in the background. These are his students. This is the entrance into the academy. And they're shown realistically. They're in the real world, but they're studying a world beyond the real world, a world that's known by reason. Okay, and again, we've got, it's a realistic depiction of space. We've got a box with a side on it. It's casting a shadow. We've got a clock up here, a sundial that's casting a shadow. These figures are 3-dimensional. Okay, they're holding scrolls that we also can see. This is, we think this is Plato. He's pointing at this sphere. Okay, and so this is a gridded sphere. The Greeks had gridded globes. And he's talking about the sphere, but this is a sphere before him. It's a sphere he sees, okay. And for Plato, this is the world the world around him. The world that we see is transitory. It's changeable, but there's a world beyond that we know just by reason. The world of geometry, of mathematics. And this is a quote from Plato. He's describing that other world. This is a sphere. We don't see a perfect sphere, but we know what a sphere is. Okay? Euclid, his student, tells us a sphere is all points equidistant from one point in 3-dimensional space. We can all imagine it, but we don't experience it, but we know it. We all know it. And this is Plato now. This is from the Republic. Philosophers make use of visible figures and talk about them, though what they really have in mind is the originals from which these figures are images. they're not reasoning, for example, about this particular square that they've drawn, but about the square, capital S, okay, or the sphere, capital S. The diagrams they draw and the models they make, they're actual things, they're physical objects. They cast shadows, they have reflections in water, okay? But they're images. But what the students are seeking to behold are realities that can be known only by thought, okay? So Plato wanted certainty, and he sought certainty by thinking about this ideal realm, thinking about the sphere, the square. Plato also wanted justice. He was mad. His teacher, Socrates, had been exiled from Athens in part for his atheism, for thinking that the sun was an incandescent stone. Okay, rather than flee, Socrates drank the hemlock, and Plato was mad about this. He had attended his trial, to solve this, he revived a view from one of the Greek mystery cults, the Pythagorean, that this other world, it's the world of mathematics, but it's also a world where good people go. Okay, it's a heaven. Okay, good people go above, and those wicked people, that's where Socrates is. Those wicked people that condemned him, they go to Hades and they suffer for eternity. So this is the world we get. This is the world that we inherit from Platonic thought. Okay, there's a natural world. We know this by observation: the sun, moon, trees, people, and then there's a world above. Okay, it's above nature. It's supernatural, and these we know by thought alone. Okay, we know what the good is by justice. We never see it, but we know it. And the good people go up there, the virtuous. The bad people go to the underworld. Okay. They also had a view of what fantasies are, okay? And they have a dream at night or a nightmare. Where does that come from? What is that about? It comes from here. It comes from this realm of values, of ethics, of aesthetics, okay? So dreams are messages that are sent from above, telling us what's going to happen, if it's a good thing or a bad thing. This is a red figure vase showing us someone having a dream. This is Ariadne, and she's having a dream while her lover Theseus flees. He's about to jump on his boat. Okay, Athena is in the on Olympus. She's above, and she's sending Ariadne a dream. Okay, and this is Hypnos. He's flown down to her and is sprinkling this dream. Okay, in the form of flowers. Okay, and so dreams are messages from above. All right, so these traditions are merged then. The manuscript that Barbara's going to show us is a result of the merger of these traditions. And it's merged after Greek culture spread throughout the Mediterranean in Roman times, and it's merged with Christianity, which is developed in the meantime. Jesus is a Jew born into in the Near East, and so he's a Jew maturing in this Roman province. So in classical culture, and these traditions are merged in early medieval times by early fathers of the church after the legalization of Christianity in 313. Early fathers of the church, the desert fathers like St. Augustine, he lived here in Hippo, in what's today Algeria. I mean, he studies classical thought, and he converts to Christianity, and he merges these traditions. And so we get, this is a page that from the manuscript, from the Beatus that Barbara will be showing, we get a many-leveled universe in it, like the, in the heaven, the realm above. I mean, like the classical Greeks, the deities are imaged. This is Jesus with the apostles. The deities are imaged okay? There are pictures of them, but like Plato, okay, he's giving but in Platonic thought, we also have geometric figures up here, okay? It's a mix from classical culture, okay? And the higher realm sends messages by, in Greek times it was a Nike or Hypnos, now it's an angel bringing messages from below, okay? And notice, this is a map, but by the time this is done, Islamic culture, here's Mecca. Muhammad is in the 600s, and it begins here, and then it sweeps, and it spreads North Africa and up into Spain, and so the manuscript is done. It's Christian, done in Islamic culture. Okay. And then classical culture is revived. This mix of Neoplatonism and Catholicism. This is revived then in the or characterized as the Renaissance. So here we have Raphael's painting of the Disputa. Now we have the everyday world, and people are living well again. They want to. They're drawing it realistically, right? We've got, this is an altar here. They're having a dispute about the transubstantiation of the elements of Holy Communion. It's a theological dispute they're having. And it's on an altar that we have in Renaissance perspective. We have cast shadows, all right? And the world above, look at this. I mean, we also have the heavenly hosts and the deities, got the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They're people like us. They're just idealized people. But we also have the Platonic, okay? They're in perfect geometry, okay? They're in spheres and circles, okay? So we have this double-tiered space that's a mix of the classical and Christian traditions. To see the underworld, we need to go north, okay? And we're seeing, this is Jan van Eyck's painting of the Last Judgments. So Christ in judgment with the blessed, the elect, and below are the damned. Okay, in between we have the real world with people coming out of there. They're being judged as they emerge from their coffins, or those who have drowned at sea. The Renaissance scholars also studied the ancient Greek view of dreams and fantasies. This is a Lorenzo Lotto painting, 1505, showing a young woman having a dream. It's coming from above, okay? It's an angel now is bringing this dream to her from the heavens. She's dreaming of satyrs, okay? And this is the aspect that changes from antiquity into the present. The realm of, where dreams come from, where values come from, where ethics come from. Okay, we have this, the rest of it stays pretty much in place, but we go from imagining that we're created in the image of a deity to, but in mid-19th century, knowing that we're descended from an ape. And this changes forever our view of the mind. Where do dreams come from? They come from here. Their message is not from above, but from ourselves. We're telling ourselves something with those nightmares. And where do values come? They come from here. Nature isn't good or bad, it just is, okay? It's value judgments are imposed by humans. I mean, we get together and decide what's just, okay, and those change over time. And so as we enter the modern era, which Barbara will be showing us, this is the layout then. This is what we have after the 19th century, and this is where we are today. There's a natural world. We live in the natural world. We're in it at the moment, okay? The sun, moon people, and we each have an inner world, which we know by introspection. We know we study it. We study our dreams, justice and goodness we know by examining ourselves. Okay, and we know this world by perception, by seeing, hearing, touching. This world we know by thought alone. We know this is a world of pure mathematics. This is a world of science. Okay, natural science and the doctors of the soul, the science of the soul. Okay, and then as we enter modern times, people in this Christian classical tradition start looking for these patterns that are embedded in the natural world, okay? Like Johannes Kepler, okay? So he's German, he's Lutheran, okay? And he's studied Euclid. He's got a compass and straight edge, and he's looking at the natural world, and he finds the patterns that are embedded there, okay? It's early 1600s, planets travel in elliptical paths with the sun at one foci, okay? Ellipses, all points equidistant from 2 points. Planets sweep out equal areas in equal times. There's a precise ratio between the year on each planet and its average radius, time squared divided by distance cubed. And this becomes modern science. Okay, and this is Einstein now commenting on Kepler. Once we're at Kepler, we're into the modern worldview. Kepler's marvelous achievement is a particularly fine example of the truth that knowledge comes from a comparison of math theory with observation of nature. In other words, it's both abstract thought and observation of the real world. Okay, it's not one or the other, it's the two of them. Of course, this is Einstein. Of course, observation is the sole criteria of whether a math model is correct. But the creative principle resides in mathematics. This is the Jewish Germanic view. Okay, this is the Eastern European view. Therefore, I hold it's true that pure thought can grasp reality as the ancients dreamed, as Plato, Hippocrates, and Ptolemy dreamed, the ancient astronomers, right? And so as we enter, so now we're back in modern times, and we'll be looking for we'll be looking at art from here. It's all figurative. We're in France. France remains based in observational science. They start with data, okay? Kepler and Einstein are in this other tradition, a Germanic tradition, which we're not looking at tonight, the tradition of German idealism, of Immanuel Kant and so on, and in which we start with a theory and then look for data to support it. It's like the other way. And so, but we're going to be here, and artists here are very interested. I'm going to end with showing you just a discovery about vision that impacts the artists that we'll be seeing. Okay, I mean they're based in observation, but what observation is changes with modern science. Okay, we don't. Back in the Renaissance, we thought of what we're doing with a painting that it's a planar intersection of a visual cone. Okay, that we're painting the world out there. Okay, once we get to modern neurology, then we're seeing light falling on the retina. It begins a chemical process. It's falling on. It's changing photosensitive chemicals, which are causing nerves to fire, and and we have artists that's 1860s. That's Hermann von Helmholtz, Handbook of Physiological Optics. By the next decade, we've got artists like Claude Monet wanting to paint light hitting his right, falling on his eye. Not what's out there, what's in here. We become self-reflective about our own perception. Now, just part of the modern experience, right? And that was one way to look at vision, okay? It's basically like a camera. The camera doesn't know what's out there. Just open the lens and it records. That it's a passive recorder of light. Okay, there was other people like Santiago Ramon y Cajal. He's a Madrid neurologist, physiologist, first Nobel Prize in Medicine, 1905. He said, no, it doesn't stop here. This is his drawing, just labeled in English. It doesn't stop here, but the nerves go to the back. We're looking down. They fire in the visual cortex. And it's a combination, and this is where vision is created. Okay, the visual cortex organizes these inputs. Okay, and so we need, so it's a balance between vision and organization. This is a view that Cezanne adopts. Okay, he's painting light falling on his eye and falling on his retina, but he's organizing those sensations. So it's a flattened image, but he's made this tree line up with Mont Saint Victoire here in the background. He's pulled it forward. He's creating a shallow space. And I'll just end with this quote from Cezanne. Okay, this is a 1904 interview of Cézanne, conversation with M.L. Barnard. In a painter, there are two things, the eye and the brain. The artist must look towards their mutual development. In the eye by looking at nature, and the brain by the logical organization of sensations. And so he creates this shallow space that is, and it's based in vision, but it's a constructed space. Okay, and then artists in France that follow him, that are figurative artists, they're inheriting this space, and Barbara Rolls will be talking about. Now, Barbara Rolls, just as way of introduction, just quickly, she's talking about medieval and modern tonight, and she has a distinguished background in both fields. She was a student at Columbia University of the great medieval scholar Meyer Shapiro. Then she went on to be an art critic, historian, curator in modern and contemporary art, especially in American. Okay, and one thing that's not on her resume that I like to mention, she was my teacher. When I was in grad school at UCLA, I heard, oh, there's a visiting professor at UC Irvine. It was an hour's drive. I signed up immediately for that class and drove down there each day and each week. And she was so impressive to me as a student because of her lived experience of modern art and her brilliant mind. It's my great pleasure to introduce Barbara Rolls.
Can you hear me? Well, I think as a teacher, your greatest pleasure is to have a student who has really achieved something and who has taken the discipline forward and has contributed to the discipline, which Lynn certainly has done, and I'm very proud of her. And I knew at the time she was one of the most brilliant students I would ever have. And she certainly proved that. Anyway, that was a tour de force as she took us through all of art history. I'm going back now a very short period of time between the 8th and the 13th century in Spain. In 711, the Muslims from North Africa crossed the Gibraltar Straits and invaded Spain. And they were able to sweep across the entire country, leaving only in the far north, in Asturias and Santander, these tiny Christian kingdoms. And for 500 years, there would be a battle called the Reconquest, until finally, in 1498, Ferdinand and Isabella expelled the Arabs from Spain and forced everyone to convert to Christianity. But in fact, that is not what the Muslims did. They had a period called the convivencia, which means the peaceful living together, in which they were perfectly happy to have the Jews and the Christians practice their own rights and have their own religion. Now, they were second-class citizens. Let's not consider this a wonderful thing. But they were not particularly persecuted until the later dynasties, until the puritanical dynasties sweep in from Syria. And then in the 12th and 13th century, terrible things happen, and there are massacres and martyrs. But for the 8th and 9th centuries, when Abdurrahman, who is one of the sheikhs of the Umayyad dynasty in Syria, decides, forget Damascus, I am setting up my caliphate in Cordoba. And Cordoba is one of the greatest cities in the world. The architecture of Andalusia, which is the south of Spain, is called Mozarabic. It is, some of it is done originally as mosques, but other things have been converted into churches. And then when the Christians decided they wanted the Arabs to do the decoration and the architecture, because the Arabs were infinitely more advanced, they created these wonderful, wonderful buildings, which if you ever get a chance to go to Spain, you ought to visit, because it's quite amazing. It's in the south mainly. But I'm going to talk about these manuscripts that were, the first one was done at the end of the 7th century by a monk named Beatus. Now, after 2 years in the Morgane Library, where the first relatively complete copy of this book, which is all the Gospel of St. John. That is to say, it is Revelation. It is the stories of the apocalypse, of the end of the world, of the Last Judgment. I kept looking for this original manuscript that they kept saying this monk, Beatus, had done in Asturias. Well, it doesn't exist. We have no idea what he did. We do know that he wrote a commentary on the Gospel of St. John. The Gospel of St. John, which of course was the apocalypse, the opening of the seven seals, which ends with the end of time, the Last Judgment. Now there is a great deal of argument about why all of a sudden at the end of the 8th century is there all of this business of I have to illustrate, I have to make commentary, which combines, as Lynn said, these earlier church fathers like Augustine, but particularly Taccone, who was from North Africa. And it certainly is because it's a time of great anxiety. At first people thought, well, it's anti-Islam propaganda, but actually that doesn't seem to be the case. The monk Beatus actually wrote why he made these books. He said these are to be perused by the monks, to be studied by the monks in their monasteries, so that they shall realize that they must cleanse themselves before the Last Judgment. Now, there were many prophecies that the world would end in the year 800 something or other, and then finally there was the millennial prophecy that it would end in the year 1000, but it didn't. And so people continued to be very, very scared. So these images really have nothing to do with any kind of reality. They are a kind of hallucination. They are a vision. And they come really from the fear that these monks felt and that they wanted to transmit, because these books were seen only by monks and nuns. They were done in scriptoria, in monasteries, and the first relatively well illustrated copy we have is the one in the Morgane Library of the 10th century by the painter called Maius, M-A-I-U-S. And it is considered the alpha or the Ur manuscript of this Beatus series of manuscripts. Now, all of these manuscripts were done between 800 and 1300, and they all illustrated the same scenes, which were the commentary on the visions of St. John the Evangelist. So he had these visions, of course. He's already a very strange Christian figure because he's on the Greek island of Patmos, and he's a serious mystic. So we're already dealing with deep mysticism. And this is the last book, as you probably know, of the New Testament. And it's the scariest. Now, the slide you see now is the first fragment we have is from the 9th century. And it's an illustration to Tychoneus's commentary on the vision of St. John, or the Gospel of St. John. And it is now in the Cathedral of Silos, in Santo Domingo de Silos. But there's only 2 pages, and only this one is illustrated. So it doesn't really give us a very good idea of what the style is or where the style came from. And it upset me that I couldn't figure out what were they looking at? What were they thinking that caused them to make these images, which were exceedingly flat. They have no three-dimensionality whatsoever. They are schematic, they are stylized, and they became, for artists in the middle of the 20th century, like Miro and Matisse and Picasso and Leger, a way of reconciling representation, that is to say, figurative art, with the demands of modern art for an abstract, completely flat space. Now, on the top, if you're really trying to figure out what are we looking at here, Lynn showed a slide which was of an Islamic tile, in which you saw in the interior of a mosque, and we were looking down upon objects, and very strange. Why are we looking down? And I think the reason is, first of all, at the top of this, you see the T-shape. That's an altar, but we're looking down on it. And then those heads, well, those are the martyrs. Fortunately, it's not too bloody, so you can accept it. It's all very stylized. And so the question is, where did they get this idea that, of a kind of a space that was absolutely flat and which was conceived by looking down on something? Well, the first Mappa Mundi, the first world map, is in the Beatus manuscript in the Morgane Library. And if you look, their conception, obviously the world was flat. They had no other idea. But they divide the world into zones, and these zones are each dominated by different parts of the Christian church. For example, there's the Church of North Africa, there's the Church of Asia, the Church of Rome, and it's only those parts of the world in which the church had actually spread the gospel that they knew anything about. There's a real, I think, confusion about how the medieval mind worked. Almost everybody was illiterate. The monks could read, but they could only read scripture in Latin, and their experiences were very narrow. They did not leave the monasteries. They did not take part in trade. There's a whole discussion about, with trade came a change in style to a more advanced style, which I really don't believe. I think that they really were confined, if you know anything about monastic life, to a very restricted kind of life in which they chanted. And usually many of these were in clausura, they were not allowed to speak. Many of these were silent orders. And so they meditated, and they meditated on these images. This is another of the world maps. This one is from, they all look a little bit the same to me, but the first world maps, anyway, are attached to these manuscripts. There are 26 or 27, depending on who you're reading, relatively complete versions with the images, the paintings, the pictures that illustrate the commentary to the text, very literally. I mean, when the angel of the seventh trumpet sounds the trumpet, you see that the fire and the brimstone, I mean, they're very, very literal. And I think, as opposed to all these people living very well that Lynn talked about, these people were living very badly, very badly. The Visigoths, who were the Christians in the north of Spain, to the north they had the Franks, and to the south they had the Muslims. Now the Muslims had a high civilization. The Visigoths had destroyed antiquity. So you had face-to-face, and nobody likes to talk too much about the fact that during the Dark Ages, only in Spain was antiquity preserved and could people read, and that was because the Muslim civilization was the transport for the ideas of classical antiquity, which died out in Christianity and were only rediscovered during the Renaissance. So here we have another one of these world maps, and what I love above all is, see little Adam and Eve up there in the corner? So this was their notion of human anatomy. I love these guys. And it is very primitive, yes, but it has certain characteristics that are very strange, which is you see both the back and the front of the figure on the same plane. You don't find that anywhere else except in these Mozarabic, the category that they're called Mozarabic manuscripts, because they were made by Christians living for the most part in land that was occupied by Muslims. We'll talk about how they finally were seen by many people. Okay, this is another one of the world maps, and this one is my favorite too. See the little guy on the right? He's got his foot over his head. Well, he's a scopioid, and he's in Africa because he is using his huge foot as an umbrella. And Miro knew these manuscripts very well. I mean, there's all kinds of fantasy, kind of fantasy that you have in dreams and in visions. And Spain is a country in which the visionary is very ordinary. I once asked Miro if he felt that he'd been influenced by surrealism. And he said, oh no, he said, a Spaniard does not need surrealism to be irrational. And this is true. There's a streak of irrationality. You think about El Greco, if you think about, many of these images, or the Vision of Saint Teresa, or the Saint John of the Cross. These are the Spanish saints, and they specialized in visionary experiences and hallucinations. All right, now this is a double page. This is one of the innovations of the Beatus manuscripts, and particularly by the painter we know as Maius, who worked in the 10th century. As you can see down the center is the binding. Now the fact that this is a really monumental image is very striking. Now this particular manuscript, which is in the Morgane Library, with also the last of the complete manuscripts, which is the so-called Huelgas Beatus, this manuscript was very important to Meyer Shapiro, and he gave seminars on this manuscript. But more than that, he took artists to see them. And when Leger asked him, because Shapiro could speak French and Leger couldn't speak English, but anyway, so he said, Professor Shapiro, what is the most important work of art I can see in New York? And so he said, come with me. And he took him to the Morgane Library to see this manuscript. And there is a kind of boldness about the imagery which sweeps across these two pages. There's also a tremendous amount of rhythm, and then these very strong colors. Where are these colors coming from? And we'll talk more about that. This is a detail from a page in the Maius manuscript in the Morgane Library. And you see these, the zoning, which is a very characteristic. This is also from the Morgane Beatus. You see that there are these striations, this zoning, and it is tempting to think, well, it's earth, it's heaven, it's hell, but the zoning is often in 4 bands or in a checkerboard, so it really does not have a symbolic, it's not about a symbol, it is about placing images in a kind of space that is totally unreal. There is no way that these figures could cross over one zone into another, because those zones are in different planes. So therefore we are looking at a completely unreal space, which is more than flatness, because the artists at the end of the 19th century, like Gauguin, who were looking for a decorative style, were looking at stained glass windows and cloisonné. But these manuscripts are very, very different. They have a different approach to drawing, and they have a different kind of space. I believe that the banding comes from textiles and from the decorative arts. We do not have enough of these fragments to make conclusive observations, but there is enough material in various collections. The V&A, the Metropolitan has some interesting textiles. The idea that somehow these Christians were cut off from the Muslims is a crazy idea. It's just not true. The Muslim traders would go up and they would trade their ceramics and their rugs and their whatever it was, and they were the ones who were producing any kind of luxury goods. The Christians were very primitive compared to the Muslims in Spain at that time. So this banding, I believe, comes out of textiles and carpets. This is a page, I love this. This is from the Huelgas Beatus, which is called, because it was found in the church of Las Huelgas. And it's just an amazing work of art. By the way, these pages are large. A double page would be this big. So you would be very impressed when you looked at this. You would be completely absorbed into it. And the way in which they were copied was a monk would take one of the originals to a monastery where somebody else would copy it. And then it would go on from there. But they were very precious. In 500 years, we have only 26 or 27 relatively complete versions. But here is the devil seen as the serpent with 7 heads. And he's confronting the woman of the sun, who is a symbol for the Virgin Mary. But here is this really strange business, which are all these stars. Stars and then frames and various kinds of patterning that we see in the decorative arts. This is another one of my very favorites. This is a scriptorium from the Gerona Gerona, Beatus. And that Beatus is not any longer in the Cathedral of Verona. It's in the Biblioteca Nacional in Madrid. But what's so cute, you see these little guys there? Well, one of them is a nun, and she signed it as well, and her name was Enda, E-N-D-E. And she's really the first documented painter who has signed her name that we have. And that did not seem strange. It was considered, I don't know, it didn't seem to be a problem. She was probably in a nunnery attached to this monastery. This, again, is from the Morgane Library, the Huelgas. And it's the Adoration of the Lamb. And I just want to quickly show you how I feel that the patterning and the very rich kind of ornamental line that we see really reminds us of Islamic decorative arts. This is a Sasanian textile. This is the Plague of the Locusts, also one of my real favorites. So again, you see this banding, and you see these stars. They're highly stylized. And you see, a circle. It could be the sun, could be just a circle. But the colors really are not like colors that we've seen anywhere else. They are so strong. And the way in which these figures, they have no gravity. They're not grounded. They're just flying around anywhere in a space that cannot exist except mentally. This is a page from an earlier, it's not a Beatus manuscript, it's from the Visigothic Bible of the Cathedral of Lyon, and I'm showing it just because I want to call your attention to these arabesques and these extremely ornamental designs that come out of Islamic decorative arts. And here's another guy I love. This is from the Morgane Beatus, actually. And if you look, at the fantasy that's going on with those, those creatures, who are they? And then everything is done in a way that emphasizes pattern and also a border. And this border reminds us of rugs more than anything. Again, you see this ornamental border. If you were looking at Hiberno-Saxon manuscripts, you would see marginalia, you would see all kinds of little fantasy creatures, but that's not the case with these Mozarabic Beatus manuscripts at all. What you see instead is a very stylized presentation, but not of intertwining forms, forms that are very separate and very discrete. And this one is the Adoration of the Lamb from San Miguel de Escalada. So this is an actual Islamic tile. You see the Kufic script, which is the Arabic script, which is in itself very ornamental and was very much part of their decoration because the Muslims and the Jews have no iconic deity, as Lynn pointed out, which is very important. They are forbidden to depict figures. So all their art is abstract. And here, this tile shows you this intricate kind of work that you might see on the floor, because the Muslims were specialists in mosaics, in tile work. And they would be decorating all the buildings. So here is a close-up of these little creatures talking to each other. And they're absolute fantasy. And they don't seem very scary, but actually they are very scary. And this is, if you look at that, that's a piece of a 10th century North African textile. And I think you can understand the point I'm trying to make. Now, here we have one of the illustrations from the most famous of the Beatus manuscripts, other than the one that's in the Morgane Library. And it is the Beatus of Saint-Sever. Saint-Sever is a cathedral in the south of France, and they're quite sure it was a Spanish artist, but it was done in the south of France, and the actual manuscript is in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Now, there were many exhibitions of these manuscripts as part of propaganda for the Republican cause during the Spanish Civil War. And they were reproduced in magazines, they were seen in shows in Paris. But above all, the editor of the surrealist magazine Document, who was Georges Bataille, was a medievalist. And he reproduced the scenes from the Apocalypse of Saint-Sever, where they were seen by everybody, especially his bosom buddy, Picasso. I'm just going to very quickly show you, this is also from, this is the destruction of Babylonia from the Beatus of Saint-Sever. And you see how really brilliant the colors are and how clear the forms are, almost geometric. But you see the horseshoe arches. Well, they were only done in Islamic architecture. So clearly there's an interchange going on here. Not enough, I think, has been spoken about it. Now, I love these guys. These guys are some of my favorite guys. These are the locusts turned into lions from the Beatus of the Escorial. Now, okay, now look at that guy's face. His nose is on one side and his two eyes are on the other. So once again, you have this strange and new depiction of both the front and the back, or the front and the profile views of the same image. And it's not the way the Cubists did it at all. It's a different kind of physiognomic distortion, which it turns out gave Picasso a lot to play with. So when we see Picasso's fusion of the profile and the frontal view, I think we can assume it came from his experience with the Beatus of Saint-Sever, which he saw many times. I don't make things up. I don't like the idea that somebody says, oh, this was influenced by this because I think so. No. His secretary said that he went to the Abbey of Saint-Sever, which was near where he went to the bullfights in the south of France, and there were full-scale ectochromes, which he studied. But then, and this is a painting of the 30s when he first becomes aware of these. This is the Christ in Majesty, or the Theophany of Saint-Sever. And this is a detail from the flood in Saint-Sever. Now look at this painting by Picasso of night fishing at Antibes. And we can match, really, item for item, some of these forms and the way in which they float and the way they have no gravity, and also the incredible distortions. But apparently, the painting that was really influenced by the Beatus of Saint-Sever was the Guernica. And if you look at the lower right, that's a page from Saint-Sever of the flood. And if you look at the fallen figure, and then you see Picasso's fallen figure from Guernica, I think you have to admit the guy saw that. But Picasso was a vacuum cleaner, and anything around, he just would mush it together. He was always making his own chef's master sauce out of everything he saw, but he certainly did see these. This is another page of the elders of the church. And again, where were these people? I mean, this looks like a mosaic. It looks like a checkerboard, a chessboard rather. The Muslims played chess a lot. But these figures are laid out flat, but they're not laid out flat in the way we might think of them. They're laid out flat as if we were looking down on them. This is just a rug that I pulled in an Islamic rug, just to give you a sense of the kind of the kind of decorative ornamental instinct. And this is another one of the elders of the church. And this is the fall of Babylon. The fall of Babylon actually is in the book of Daniel, which some of the Beatus manuscripts illustrate. But how strange that Babylon has horseshoe arches. And then we have this serpent coiled all around the church because Babylon is about to be destroyed. But again, the arabesque, as it's called, is the ornamental line in Islamic art that comes from the geometric reduction of the patterns of vegetable ornamental forms, which they repeat over and over again. And we know that Jackson Pollock, for example, was very influenced by the all-overness of these patterns. But earlier than that, we know that these manuscripts were known in Paris. Okay, this is from the Hirona Beatus. Now, this is the one copy of the manuscript which everyone will admit has very definite Islamic influence. And there is the serpent and the peacock. The serpent eats the peacock, and it all has a great symbolic value. But in almost all of the Beatus illustrations. But again, what is being conveyed is this incredible rhythm, the line, that seems almost abstract. This is another scriptoria. You see, there are the two monks. They're sitting in the scriptoria, and this this is again from the Hirona Beatus, and there's the so-called Muslim rider, the Islamic rider, and they can't explain this except to say, you know, the guy really was an Arab. All right, he went up to Hirona and he was wearing his turban, and he really was. And I've put this next to another image illustration from the Hirona Beatus, and this is the Whore of Babylon. The Whore of Babylon was very, very popular in terms of later artists. Now, this is an image that was done by Carl Jung. He published a book of manuscript paintings called the Red Book, and in them he tells you his dreams. Now, strangely enough, these dreams are just like the Beatus visions, coincidentally. So either there is a collective consciousness, or he was very much influenced by the Beatus manuscripts. You see, there's one of the sort of great theophanies, as they call it, which I think influenced Jung. This is another page from the Saint-Sever Beatus, and this is the angel giving the book of Revelation to St. John. Now, the facsimile edition of this manuscript, which was kept in the Bibliothèque Nationale, was published Christmas 1942 by Morlot. Morlot was the publisher, the lithographer for Matisse, Miro, Picasso, and Leger, all four. And he sent them all copies. And the curious thing is why, when there was no paper and there was no ink, that he would choose to publish this facsimile of a Beatus. And I think it's because it was the worst time in Paris. It really was good against evil. The Nazis had taken over. They had rounded up all the Jews in the Valdiv, sent them off to Trancy, to the death camps, basically. And Morlot was protecting all of the Jewish publishers who he had kind of in his cellar working and printing things. At the end, he pretended to buy their companies, but at the end of the war, he gave them back. So there is this curious, why suddenly in 1942 there are 100 copies of facsimiles of this manuscript that are seen by artists. Now this is a painting, oh God, this is a painting by Picasso of 1930, and it's one of the very few religious paintings by Picasso. It's a crucifixion. Now, of course, it's totally distorted, and you see the front and the back of the same images, and everything's terribly grotesque. The colors are very much the Beatus colors. And here it's very complicated because Bataille, who published Documents and who published these manuscripts, was an anti-Christian, and he wanted to really, he was interested in debasement, blasphemy. So I'm not sure we can really call this a religious image. It's still to be studied, but it's the same size. When you see it, it's painted on wood, very rare for Picasso, and it's the same size as a double page of the Beatus. It certainly has some characteristics which are in common with the Catalan altar frontals of the 12th century, which were being seen in the new museum in Catalonia. Again, Picasso and Miro were very influenced by them. Oh yeah, now here's a page and it's a close-up. Please look at this rider in the middle. Okay, you see the back of the horse and the profile of the horse at the same time. Where is that happening? How is that possible? Well, Picasso takes that and he uses it. This is a drawing for the crucifixion, which is really blasphemous, and we don't really need to go into this too much. This is a drawing for the Guernica. And again, I mean, this baby's head is upside down, and what kind of space is this in? And you have the two eyes on one side and the nose on the other, reminding us of this wonderful image from the Escorial Beatus. This is a horse and bull, and again, you see that same combination of the two views, and it's not cubist. But Picasso is working very hard to find a decorative style, because he has to catch up to Matisse. And so he looks at these manuscripts and he thinks, this drapery can turn out to be very interesting patterning. And so he starts using these patterns. And that becomes characteristic of his work around 1940. And I showed you the Adam and Eve where you can see both sides, but here's Picasso, a woman in the armchair, and here's Matisse's large blue nude. And again, there are these composites of a profile and a frontal view, which we see originally in the Beatus. This is a Hispano-Moresque bowl. There's a great tradition in Spain of this lusterware that the Muslims created. But if you look at the way in which the pattern is contained within the frame and according to the shape of the bowl, it makes sense when you look at these, the fact that in the Beatus manuscripts, the whole image is contained within the frame. It's not, running around outside with marginalia. It's inside this frame. This is one of the weeping women, the portrait of Dora Maar after Picasso finished torturing her. And again, you see the colors, the flatness is very graphic, in fact, and the striations, which are like the drapery, and it's one of these paintings that was done during the war in Paris. This is Miraut's portrait of Miss Mills in 1750, and to the right, one of the pages from the Beatus of Saint-Sever, where you see the banding, you see the stars, which become very characteristic of Miraut. And this is a detail. This is Miraut. You see the zoned landscape. This is the Catalan landscape. It's one of his first abstract paintings, a truly great painting. And it also has text in it, which makes you think he looked at image and text. This is one of Miraut's personages. Again, the zones, the three zones, a very brilliant color. And this again is there's the devil and with the toads. I mean, everybody saw the toads in a different way. And this is the Four Horsemen from another page in Saint-Sever. And here are the souls cast into hell. But if you notice that runner over there, I mean, where are these people? I mean, and there is the Whore of Babylon from the Morgane Beatus. Now, one of the artists that Shapiro took to see the Morgane Beatus was Mata, who was living in the United States. And Mata loved grotesque stuff. And he painted a work after the Whore of Babylon, and we think it might be this one, which is called Always Mistreated. And you see all this really, really grotesque and ferocious and man-eating and whatever, which we actually see going on over here. Here is an angel casting Satan in the form of the serpent into the underworld. But I call your attention to the banding, to the decorative functions, to the monumentality, and that is what, obviously, Léger saw. This is Léger's The Swimmers. Again, no gravity, planes of color behind these flat forms, drawing for the swimmers, circus. And here you see the checkerboard pattern. And this is why I feel that trying to say that the zones correspond to heaven, hell, and earth is not right. It's the checkerboard, it creates a much more abstract space. We really don't know. It's ornamental. It's like mosaics. It's like tiles. One of the people who took Shapiro's seminar was Ad Reinhardt. And he was particularly interested in the illuminated pages. And this is a postcard he sent with one of the pages. And this is from a fragment from the Beatus of Saint-Sever, which Matisse got in 1943. And he immediately did the cover of Verve. He was recovering from a bad operation. And his first cutouts were done inspired by these images from the Beatus of Saint-Sever. This one is called the Sword Swallower. This one's from jazz, because from there, then he did a full set of pochoirs called jazz. And here is the Whore of Babylon from Saint-Sever. Here is Matisse's Circus cutout. And here's one of my really favorite guys. This is from Saint-Sever, and it is Satan and the Satyrs. Now, how on earth did Johannes Itten, who wrote the textbook for the Bauhaus, reproduce this in the 1921 curriculum textbook of the Bauhaus? Because he was so interested in the way color was used, because it was not the interaction of color, it was something else. And this is a painting by Itten. You can see he was directly influenced by it. This is Léger, another one of these happy, frolicking circus paintings after the war, because after the war it was like a resurrection. I mean, Matisse felt resurrected, Europe felt resurrected, and the images that come after the war are quite gay. Here's another one of Matisse's cutouts, but I think you can see its relationship to the Beatus of Saint-Sever. So I think, yes, I've pretty much used up our time, but you can see the difference in the space that these medieval monks, in their sackcloth, eating potatoes, not having a nice life at all, what they created, and these beautiful, luxurious, and harmonious images that Lynn showed you. Thank you. I think we should let the audience ask questions.
Yeah, okay. Any thoughts? I'm convinced. I'm sold. Yeah.
On my hypothesis, because
yeah,
I mean, I went through this and I go, where
yeah.
is this coming from?
Yeah, and like you said about Picasso, that he would make a stew, with whatever is around.
Yeah.
And that you've got him looking, and that's so crucial, that you're documenting that the artists actually saw these manuscripts, like the Santiago.
Oh yeah, no, they saw them. I went through the files in the Morgane Library.
Yeah.
I have all that can tell you of the 8 artists who saw them.
Yeah.
Can tell you when Shapiro gave the seminars, and I can tell you which artists in Paris received the facsimile edition of Saint-Sever.
Right, and that makes sense. And especially the Spanish artists like Miro
Exactly.
and Picasso would be drawn to this. Would be drawn to the
Well, it's their
Spanish,
culture.
because it's their and that it was promoted at this time. The Spanish link was promoted at this time. Yeah, it really makes sense.
Well, as propaganda for the Republican government, because most of these monasteries were around Catalonia.
Yeah. Okay. And I give up about the layering. Okay, you got it with the texture.
Yeah, it isn't about heaven and hell. It's much too abstract, and you get 4 bands, 5 bands. It doesn't make sense in terms of a tripartite, which does make sense in every other depiction.
In others, yeah, but it's more decorative patterns.
Yep, exactly.
And the way it's treated is more decorative. And you can
They're
see it in the
not looking at any frescoes. There's some possibility that these miniature paintings, which are not so miniature, they're pretty big, influenced Romanesque frescoes in Spain, but people are still a little bit not too much done about that.
Yeah. Okay, any thoughts?
No, that's not what I meant at all. I mean, I meant that the monks were not living so well. I mean, they were eating gruel out of the bowls, and they had very little, and they're wearing sackcloth or whatever. But no, during the war, there were huge shortages when some of these paintings were made. So no, it's really the interest, I think, had to do with 2 historic events. Number one, the Spanish Civil War, the fact that all this stuff was being shown all over the world and published. And the publication is important because people don't think, well, if it's published, is that? Yes, it did. It meant a lot. In 1929, Document, the Surrealist magazine, headed by Georges Bataille, did a whole layout of the Beatus of Saint-Sever. And it gets even more complicated. But then also, I think the fact that the Nazis have taken over Paris and Morelot decides, I am going to publish the facsimile of this manuscript. There's a little message there. I mean, watch out, you devils. I think there was a little bit of that. I mean, I don't know, because we have no real proof, because he was under surveillance himself. Oh yeah, because it was known that he had saved these Jewish publishers, and who were in fact the owners of all the major French publishing houses. So.
Yeah, and what I had in mind was, it's not just that you publish the world. I mean, that represent the world when you're happy in it, but how you do it. You know, that it's represented in such great detail, and lovingly.
But you see after the war, when Leger goes back, or Miro, they go back to Paris, and they're celebrating. They're celebrating a kind of resurrection of European culture, and there's all these circus scenes, and Matisse as well. So it means something else after the war.
Yeah, and I think once we get into modernism, that doesn't hold. I mean,
you don't think of these guys as modern?
No. I mean, once we get into Leger and these modernists, all of the influences of abstraction are there. Okay, I'm thinking of
but I think that they're looking for a different kind of source. In other words, they've looked at children's art, they used that up. They used up the art of the insane. They used up cloisonné, they used up stained glass, they used up primitive art. They're looking for another source. And suddenly they find this source in medieval manuscripts.
Yeah, and that it has powerful emotional content.
Yes, you can't look at this stuff without thinking,
definitely.
Yes, you can. Yes, they will let you look at the facsimile. They have it. Yeah, I do. But I think above all, I think the source of all of this thinking about the world is maps, because the first images are of maps. They're trying to show you where the Christian church is located. And up here you got little Adam and Eve, and they're the center of the Christian world, located, I'm not sure exactly what continent, but I mean, their concept of the world was not only that it was flat, but it was zoned, and you were looking down on it. Well, well, I'm sure Lynn knows the answer to this one too. Medieval pigments were different. They were done out of crushed semi-precious stones like lapis lazuli, and then the red was crushed beetles, and they came out, it wasn't like paint today, which were then suspended in an emulsion. But the ones that look like their primary colors, those are all the Sansevere images. And those were the images that Matisse and Picasso would have been most, although Picasso saw the other ones too, but they would have been most exposed to those. But for example, if Morgane Beatus has many other colors. It has violet, it has orange, it has all kinds of other colors. The choice of colors was limited, but it was not limited to just the primary colors. I mean, they had verdigris, there were, some earth colors, umber. It's what they could actually make pigment out of. They didn't have chemistry, so, it was whatever they had.
Yeah, but it's more that than symbolism. Yeah, yeah.
Well, no, in the Bible there is, very heavy symbolism about the Virgin, and red and blue, and, those are very heavily symbolic colors. But in these manuscripts, I think it's really what they was available, Yes, exactly. Yeah, go to the Morgane website. They have better images than I do. But I mean, they're really surprising. They're just so much more original than what you're looking at, in the galleries. And that's because they come out of a different mindset, and they might be very inspiring.
Thank you, Barbara Rose and Lynn Gamwell.